I think that's kind of bull. Honestly, like, I think, if you have a compelling enough solution and you're offering value, like, they will take you seriously.
You have your co-founder and you have your minimal viable product. Next step, $1 million in revenue. Imagine getting there with one customer. Imagine passing 5 million with 3 customers. That is whale hunting. That is going after big customers with big deals. It's not advisable, but sometimes it's the only path, because what you dreamed up was an enterprise value prop from day one. So today we turn to my friend, Ed Calnan, the co-founder of Seismic and first sales leader. He's walking us through how to get their attention, how to make that problem seem really big, how to get through procurement, how to get through security, all the things that kill the startups that try this path. We're going to demystify that journey. I'm Mark Roberge, and this is The Science of Scaling. All right, hey, Ed, welcome to the show.
Nice to see you, Mark.
Geez, what a run for Seismic over such a volatile macro condition. And I'm so excited to unpack, especially the early days. So you want to bring us back there, like how that came about?
I was lucky enough to meet the founding group of Seismic at 2 companies prior. So we had a unique combination, because it's typically, you see with founding teams, it's either mostly on the commercial side or mostly on the product side. And I feel like we nailed it in a sense where we had a really great combination of super bright product folks, as well as someone who had done the sales and marketing side before. So we started at a company called Document Sciences. We turned that company around over a couple of years and then sold it to EMC in 2008. And then we left and started Seismic together.
Hey folks, just Mark here. This is very interesting in laying the foundation at the start for success. It's almost like a who, when, why kind of thing. Like he says, okay, these are the brightest engineers I've worked with. But more importantly, they're the exact opposite of him. Like how many times are we out there seeing these founding teams and it's like 2 MIT engineers or 2 HBS MBAs or 2 McKinsey alum or 2 doctors from Mass General Hospital. It's like we gravitate to the homogeneity. We gravitate to the people that are like us, but a founding team needs to be diverse from a skill standpoint from the beginning. You got the engineer, you got the business / go-to-market person. Beautiful foundation. Then the when. Recession, crisis, no funding. Amazing time to start a business for a variety of reasons. Number one, it's so hard to get funded, you're going to just see less competition. Right? Number two, what a market to build a team in. This is the best talent is out there. And then number 3, it's very easy to determine if you have a must-have value prop or a nice-to-have value prop. Because in recessions, nice-to-have value props don't sell. And if you can sell something in a recession, it sure is a must-have. What a great foundation for what ended up being a fantastic business. Let's get back to Ed.
It was three founders in a 2-bedroom apartment in San Diego writing the code, and then it was me in my attic here in Boston, calling everyone I've ever met, asking them to see a demo of the product. Yeah,
you did mention like bright engineers,
yep.
And we both speak to a lot of like non-technical aspirational founders that know they need to go find like that technical founder. Yep. How do you know that someone's good as like, someone that's not coding every day? And how did you get that sense with your technical co-founders?
It was lucky because we kind of tested it out a little bit at the beginning. I imagine it's quite difficult if you're a founder looking for a co-founder and trying to establish chemistry. I think it all comes down to values though. Like, why are you in it? And like, none of us were in it to get rich. We were just in it because we wanted to build something great. And like all the places we had worked at before just weren't we wanted to build the company that we would all want to work at.
Now you're in it, you're building it. You got this MVP. And I think a lot of folks struggle at that point with like alpha customer acquisition, if we can call that now. Yeah. These are our design partners. How do you even get their attention? And in your case, you all kind of came out of the gate on the enterprise. Like there are certain plays where you have an aspiration for an enterprise value prop and that segment right out of the gate. And that's fine. And that's what you did. That even quadruples the difficulty of finding these design partners. Can you speak through that process?
Good news for us is that it was a similar customer base that we sold to at EMC. So I had an existing relationship network. I had great champions that were good relationships that were willing to take a risk on us. But so we went right after the financial and insurance space right out of the gate. I targeted accounts that were interested in working with young companies. So there's a lot of big accounts out there that like to work with emerging technology platforms because they get to have an influence on how that platform evolves, right? So GE was famous for that. We went to GE Capital. Liberty Mutual is famous for that. Fidelity Investments had an incubator where they'd incubate emerging technologies to see if they could impact the business. Mass Mutual has another incubator here in Boston. So we targeted those accounts, and based on prior relationships as well as research I did, I knew that their appetite would be open to working with technology that wasn't proven and wasn't super bulletproof yet and those types of things. It's hard because to get onboarded as a vendor to one of those big, specifically financial companies takes a while. I remember when we were working with Liberty Mutual for the first time, found my champion, found the use case, proved it out. He said yes, had budget. We went into sourcing, and he said, okay, all I'll need to get the onboarding process started is 3 years of audited financials.
Yeah, exactly.
And I said,
tax
we don't even
returns,
have an accounting.
Oh my gosh.
We don't even have an accountant. Like, I can maybe show you a snapshot of what our account balance is, but it ain't going to look good. So we figured out how to get around it, and we got onboarded. And so we just started building from there. But it took me almost a year to get our first paying client, which was actually General Electric. We actually got a deal with GE. And that's kind of advice to founders who are listening, like, don't overthink your pricing. Don't overthink, like, it was just an intro that I got to one of their CIOs. And he said, look, I want to give you a shot. I want to give this company a shot. I really like the product. I have $6,000 left in my budget for this year. And I said, I'll take it.
So this is like straight out of Science of Scaling methodology. Just as a reminder, I'm showing the methodology here. We got 3 steps: product market fit, go-to-market fit, growth and moat. So where Ed is here in the Seismic journey is they're clearly in the pursuit of product market fit. Notice how he is optimizing the go-to-market system design choices perfectly for that stage. Pricing. Fine, I got $5,000. Great, I'll take it. We're not pricing for profitability at this point. We're trying to find product market fit, which doesn't have anything to do with revenue optimization. All I want this company committed to trying my product, to solving one of their problems, and getting a chance to be able to do that. And that is what Ed is doing time and time again with these design partners, alpha customers, whatever you want to talk to them about. Number 2, he's qualifying hard on whether they're an early adopter or not. Like he walked into this with a lot of background and understanding of the market. He knew which brands were willing to take bets on new products. Who were the innovators? They had a reputation for it. Versus the people that were conservative. The folks that needed 20 references. The folks that needed SOX compliance. The folks that needed like a 9-month trial. He is just perfectly qualifying out the laggards and spending his time on the early adopters to pursue this product market fit. Okay. Number 3, he's purposely he has a strong hypothesis on the TAM, the industry, the size of company, the type of buyer, but he's purposely experimenting around the periphery of that hypothesis. He's not like boiling the ocean, but he's purposely taking meetings with folks that are around it, and that ultimately leads him to figure out that opening aha moment, that opening aha use case that they actually scale onto, right? What great execution around this stage of the science of scaling. Let's get back to Ed.
But we got the GE logo and we ended up division hopping into like 6 other GE business units. So from GE Capital, we went to aviation, we went to oil and gas, we went to healthcare. So it's not always that first amount. Sometimes it's just access, and then having the cachet of saying, sure, GE's a customer, and we got through their security and they took a flyer on us.
Biggest question I get every day. How do you build the next unicorn? How do you build predictable, scalable revenue growth? Luckily, the folks at HubSpot have put together the Science of Scaling database. Real playbooks from companies that have gotten to the scale of like 40 billion in market cap. The playbooks cover key decisions like hiring, compensation, go-to-market strategy, ICP development, even stuff on AI in sales. All from the folks behind the fastest growing companies in tech. It's not fluffy. It's super tactical. You know my content, you know my brand. It's stuff that you're gonna pick up, download, and put to use within an hour. So head to the description, click on the link, and download your free copy to start scaling your business today. I think you had some advantages because you had some relationships. You also mentioned you did some research. Yeah. I bet there might have been some like discovery as well. Sure. Can you kind of like bring that framework to life a little bit of like, hey, you're a founder, you need an alpha customer, and you should be qualifying hard on distinguishing between an early adopter and a laggard. How do you do it?
Yeah, I think you gotta qualify in and out pretty quickly. I think you also should think through like the use cases that you have in mind and go have some conversations that don't necessarily fit what you have in your head, because that's what happened to us. Like our product basically was a document automation platform that ended up redefining the sales enablement category over the next 10 years. None of us even knew what sales enablement was until Forrester came knocking on the door and said, hey, we want to cover you in this report. And I remember thinking like that TAM might not be big enough. I don't know if we want to be thought about as that type of company because the product was much more broad. I would encourage folks to like do some research on big companies who like to work with emerging companies because they're out there, and go talk to them and have a conversation with them. But then also, I remember just going back to old relationships, and we had a huge business in investment management. So we would automate the quarterly marketing collaterals for all of the world's biggest mutual fund companies. So like BlackRock, Fidelity, State Street, all of those folks. And that use case was not in my head when we went out, and it came about through sitting in a meeting with a person I knew at TIAA CREF. And he said, you know, I like what your technology does, but this is my biggest pain point right now, which is at the end of every quarter, we have to manually go through and update all of these collaterals. Sitting with our CTO, Mark, at the table, and I looked at him and he said, I think so. And I said, okay, if we can, like, let us go take a crack at this. If we can prove this, you got to buy it. Like, we're going to go do some work and like get us on as a vendor and buy it. One of my favorite people on the planet, Rod Smith, who's now at Goldman Sachs, took a chance on us and then found that use case. It was incredibly important because it's, you know, it was such an easy value prop. It takes you 10 weeks with an average of 6 people to do this work at the end of the quarter. If you use Seismic, it'll take you 10 days with one person. And it just worked. So we grabbed it, stamped it, and we'll walk down Wall Street and talk to every other fund company on the planet. We ended up with like 250 customers on the financial side just for that solution alone. Once you see those light bulbs go off, again, I would think about like not what's in your head, but go have a bunch of conversations that are kind of in, you know, at the ICP or the use case you're thinking about, but there are broader ways that products can get used that you just don't see in the early days. Once you find it, replicate it. Like we did it that immediately, put a whole sales team just selling to mutual fund companies. They did nothing else. They had a list of 350 firms that's all they could call. And we started to rip, and we ended up being the standard on Wall Street. Like, people were getting promoted, people are putting on their LinkedIn bios that they were Seismic certified. Like, it was a thing all of a sudden on the street.
Yeah, like, what an aha moment, a breakthrough moment for the firm, so much energy. And I guess, like, I'm trying to channel the founder and the first seller that are trying to, like, avoid the trap of chasing whatever shiny object every customer's telling me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like, yeah, if you build that, and then you build it and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
You like, how can you guide them a little bit on that? Was that when you had that moment? Was it you already had heard it multiple times and that's why your CTO Mark agreed to it? Or like, can you unpack how you distinguish those a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So we were thinking more at the end user level of, like, people creating their own marketing collaterals. We had this little wizard that would allow you what now AI can do in minutes. Like, it used to take humans days and hours to prepare for sales meetings, and that's what we automated. So we were thinking of, like, Mark or Ed using the software. We never considered, like, giving it to an administrator and let them do it in batch, right, at bulk speed. And that's what he was asking. Like, instead of my sellers going in there and doing the collateral, can I just do it at scale with one process and do it for all materials and then push those materials to the sellers after that? So it was
that was just an example of, like, that just makes sense.
Yes.
Like, that is not unique to these guys. It's just like, we're not living in their shoes as well as we should have. And now that he said it, it's like light bulb.
Exactly right. And we didn't have to change much for the product. That's the key. So when the light bulb goes off, if you don't have to, commit 40% of your dev resources to go do this, it was just kind of close. And once I started interviewing, and that's another thing I would think about is, like, once you fix that problem, go interview the constituents around it whose lives just got better. So I remember going to talk to the sales leaders at TIA, and the sales leader telling me this is the best thing of all time, because I used to have sellers sitting on the sidelines for 10 weeks waiting for these collaterals, and then I'd have 2 weeks of selling time at the end of the quarter. And the marketing team saying, yeah, our lives sucked for 10 weeks because we'd have to manually go in and do all this stuff. Now with that 10 weeks freed up, we can go do marketing. I've got an MBA from Wharton and I'm doing spreadsheets all night long. I want to go do marketing stuff. And so I grabbed those quotes on either side, and that turned into our sales pitch, and off we went, and forget it. We weren't going to the administrators anymore. I was targeting the sales leaders at all those accounts. So the head of sales at BlackRock was like, your sellers sit around on the sidelines for 10 weeks. I can give you 10 weeks of selling time back for every rep. And that's what ended up being the pitch. Which is, it doesn't matter how the product works, right? It matters the outcome and the business value that you deliver. So I would encourage that too. Like, go interview your customers, go talk about how the software is changing their business. Doesn't matter how it works. I know we all love our product nerdy things, but, like, go talk to the customers, and then that can be your value selling pitch after that.
So you also mentioned, like, you were with the innovation group. Right, like that you heard, and I've heard, like, for a lot of places, don't ever sell innovation. That's where these pilots go to die. They're not taken seriously. Like, can you maybe, like, talk to the founders that have either heard that advice or been through that, and, like, how do you manage the innovation group or know that it's a real opportunity? Can you just double click on that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of bullshit, honestly. Like, I think, if you have a compelling enough solution and you're offering value, like, they will take you seriously. Like, their job sometimes, at Fidelity in particular, their innovation lab was very highly regarded. Like, the members of that lab were all ex-business leaders that kind of were on the exec track, and they spent, like, a bit of time in there trying to figure out what was coming for hot new companies. GE was the same. Like, GE had a really strict rule. They had to use good ideas from other divisions. So a good example of that is the first CIO that was our sponsor there, this guy, Dave Burns, who I'm still friendly with. He was the guy with the $6,000. We got them up live, and I went to take him to dinner in Cincinnati. That's where aviation's headquartered. And he said, Ed, I love your stuff. I love working with you. I want to help you. And he said, but I need you to answer a question honestly. And I said, I'll do my best. And he said, I'm going to stand on stage in front of 100 other business line CIOs at our GE conference. And we're all tasked with bringing one idea for the week workshop. I want to showcase you. And I said, okay. And he said, if 50 to 75 CIOs say, I want to try Seismic, are you capable of fulfilling that demand? And I nervously said, yes. I did.
It's the problem everybody wants. So let's have
that was the correct answer. But he was real cool about it because he was like, look, I've seen this crush other companies that aren't ready. I trust you. I want to continue to build a relationship. If you're not ready, wait 8 more months and I'll bring you on stage the next time. And I said, you know what, Dave, I think we're ready. And it ended up getting us into like a bunch of other divisions. So I think it's really worthwhile. If you're heading towards the enterprise, it's worth spending time with those folks.
That makes sense. And then you kind of skimmed over sourcing and procurement because we gotta, I mean, whenever there's a VC or an advisor, like don't go to the enterprise, there's a long list, right? Like, you know, long sales cycle, you know, they're going to want to see all the references, like good luck with security. They always mention procurement. You'll never get through procurement.
Yep.
And, you know, the book's been written about best practice on how to get through procurement. It's not very well, you know, known out there, but not how do you get through procurement as a startup. That hasn't been talked about much. So you kind of glanced over it. You're like, we figured it out. But can you bring that we figured it out to life a little bit?
At my current place, we're scaling up into the enterprise and we're still having similar challenges. I mean, incredibly well capitalized company, super strong, 100 million plus in ARR. And it takes a while to get into the enterprise because of all the things you described. That's one of the advantages that I had with starting with those innovation labs, because companies that want to bet on emerging cool things will help you with that process. But it's frustrating, you know, procurement does their job, which makes sure you have the least amount of vendors and the best amount of technology options, and everybody likes to standardize. And it is difficult. I think networking there as well. The business leaders, if you get high enough, can make procurement go faster. So we're working on one with a big bank here now, and we're friendly with the EVP of retail banking. And we just got the official nod, and he's making some behind the scenes things happen that is going to make the process go faster.
Yeah, this is just like champion development. It's key in all sales. It is critical in enterprise. We've talked about this in the past. You talk to some of the best enterprise sellers out there, and they're like, I don't win because I have the best price. I don't win because I have the best product. I win because I have the strongest champion. And Ed is one of the best at developing and sniffing out a strong champion. It's critical here. We got to get through procurement. We got to get through security. And, you know, my mentor, John McMahon, would always tell me, a great champion is willing and able. They're all willing, but are they able? And this is a great case study of that. Is like, you got this champion that's really excited about you, and you know how you're going to get this deal done. And you ask them, how do we get through security here? Who's the person you work with? What are the questions they're going to ask? What are the right answers? What if they try to delay it for 3 months? And then we talk about procurement. How are we going to get through procurement? What are they going to poke at? What's the best way to get through that? Who do you like to work there? That individual's answers are going to be extremely instructive as to whether you have a strong champion, and they're going to get you through that red tape, even though you're a brand new product and a brand new brand. Let's get back to Ed.
The reason why we chase this stuff and the reason why it's so difficult and it takes a long time is they're bigger numbers. They sign multi-year deals when you can get rid of term for convenience. And so those contracts are worth it. You know, as everybody knows, you know well, in advising companies, if you can get a 3-year contract versus a 12-month contract with a term for convenience, like life is just infinitely easier. Because if you do a 12-month deal, you're implementing for the first 3 months, and then you're trying to prove value for the next 3 months, and then your renewal's up for for conversation right then. And it's just next to impossible to prove true value of a platform in a 3-month time frame. It's impossible to do. So it's worth it.
How do you manage the investors through that process?
Yeah.
Did you have to manage up at all with that?
We didn't take outside capital until we closed our A round in August of 13. So we launched in January of 11. We had about a 1.2 million in ARR with like 12 or so customers, big name customers as well. So for us, it was more about like, how do we scale that now? We did have a bunch of customers that didn't stick as well. So at the beginning, GE Capital is a bank that serviced a bunch of retailers. And we had a champion there that introduced us to the CTO at, believe it or not, Toys R Us. He said, I got 50 grand and I've heard that you guys are great. And like, do you want to give it a shot? So I said, yes, it's 50 grand. It's a decent logo at the time. It was a big company with a CIO who gave us some money. And if we could replicate it, we would have. Those logos tended to go away. And once we found our sweet spot, we laser focused on it. So, the hard thing about selling to the enterprise, I joke with my team now, it's like, by the time you close a deal, you hate the fucking logo so bad, you don't even want to say it anymore. And, if you've done this a few times, like I tell the board now, like, all right, I know we're still talking about this one and that one and this one. And, they didn't not close, they just slipped, which you sit on a bunch of boards, how fun that conversation is too. But if you go in with proper expectations, they take a long time, but they're worth getting.
Yeah, another really important distinction when we're trying to go after these big companies right out of the gate is it's not just about like activities, calls, demos, that kind of stuff. Like these things are slow moving. If you got like 10 in your pipeline, you're great. But like understanding if you're actually making progress versus just like sitting on the same deals. And as my colleague at HBS, Lou Shipley, says, collecting forecast furniture that doesn't move anywhere. And Ed's doing a great job of helping us figure this out. Here's a tip. If you're ever on a board and you're like supposed to be like the go-to-market representative, you're supposed to like help them drive sales. I'm in so many of these board meetings and it's like, yeah, bad news is we missed the quarter. We only finished at 60%, but we have a huge pipeline going into Q2. I come back 3 months later. Well, bad news is we missed the number by, we only came in at 60%, but we have a huge pipeline going to Q3. And I'm looking around, everyone's buying it. So I'm just like, hey, you see that slide right there you have with that big pipeline with all those logos on it? I want you to show me that exact slide in 3 months when we come back here and tell me what happened with those accounts. Because I'm not falling for this anymore. Like, I'll believe you if like, you feel like we have a huge pipe and you're optimistic about the quarter. I'll believe you if you continuously tell me that you've got big pipe and you close it out at a consistent rate. But if like this story is just repetitive, then forget it. You're just like buying time for failure. All right, let's get back to Ed.
So I think it's all about going on the journey with your investors and being super clear about what you want to go do and what the cost is going to be. But then also knowing when to pivot a little bit if stuff ain't working. Mm-hmm. You measure meetings and you measure, pipeline and you measure progress in that pipeline. And like, as long as you can see it and the deals are progressing, then it's worth staying in.
Are there any aspects of that contract or expectation setting that is a non-negotiable for you at that point? That you just, I need this to be in place for us to want to lean in?
I mean, term for convenience is one that you always want to take out because well, if you got a TFC in there, you really shouldn't book it as ARR. However, in the early days, like I remember calling Doug when the guy from GE said yes. And I was like, dude, do we even have a contract? And he's like, no, I'll look it up on the internet and I'll get one though. and so it's like, of course with GE, you send them over your little thing and you don't matter. So they're like, yeah, right, whatever. Here's our contract, figure it out. And so in the early days, you just take you take the logo because it's all about momentum. You get a win and the team sees the win, and then you get a logo and you can tell others, look, they're betting on us, and you get some cash in the door no matter what it is. And then if your product's good, you can division hop. We turned $6,000 into, I haven't been there for a couple of years, but I think they're still a big customer. And when I left, they were paying us like $4 million a year.
I mean, that's the cool thing about these accounts. It starts as a $50,000 deal, and a couple of years later, it's a $5 million deal. But we got to learn to expand. So 2 potholes here. First pothole is, it's a different playbook. I feel like in the early years, the first motion that the company's building up is how to acquire new customers, and they get good at it. And then they forget that like they can expand them too, and it's a new motion. So lean in early, especially with this enterprise playbook that Ed's running. The second pothole is they assume that the department head they already closed, the champion they already closed, as they go to these new people, they have the same perspectives. No. Especially in these huge organizations. Everyone's unique. Everyone has a different goal. Everyone has a different political stance. Everyone has a different promotion path. Everybody has a different view on the strategy. We have to restart discovery with each new person that we meet, especially these department heads. They're going to champion the expansion. And Ed's demonstrating how to do that. Let's get back to him.
Business leaders they all want to help each other out. They want to give each other great ideas, and they'll sponsor you into other groups. So I think that's the key. And we did that with all of our accounts. Like we started, the land and expand motion worked really well for us. We'd start in one division and then end up getting sponsored into 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 others. I think it's another key is focus. If you have a small amount of sellers, you got to figure out which new logos and which expansions you want to work on. I remember having a conversation early where it was like, well, 70% of your pipeline is upsells and we need more logos. And I'm like, come on, do we really care where the $2 million is coming from? It's fucking $2 million. Like we have no money at this time, and you got to balance that too. Like, ARR is ARR. And if it's good ARR and it's multi-year, you take it from wherever you go. And if I used to tell the team all the time, the fastest path to cash is with an existing customer. So go find another person with the business problem you solved and you're on as a vendor. And that's a 1-page addendum. You're just selling more seats.
So before we leave, we want to talk about, you brought Seismic to the moon. It would be out there if the markets were open, and hopefully that happens at some point. But you've moved on to your next challenge, like any good entrepreneur. Can you tell us a little bit about Sochi and how you found them?
Yeah. So Seismic was about a 12-year run, probably the most proud I've ever been of something professional in my life. I was lucky to work on an incredible team. And come February of 22, we had just smashed through the $300 million ARR mark. We were still growing at like 30%. Churn was great. And it was time. It was the hardest decision I ever had to make.
I mean, come on. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, though, you were in the early days of HubSpot and saw it through an incredible exit. And like, I had just always operated like if I couldn't give my team my A+ effort, then it was time. And so took a break, which is something I've never done in life, which was great.
I remember meeting you for coffee during that time.
Right. Well,
you were all nervous about it. I'm like, dude, don't be nervous. You got to shut down.
But you were also, before I launched, you remember we had coffee in the same place. You were one of the first calls I made. And I said, I think I'm going to do this. And I said, I need you to teach me how to do content marketing back in 2010. And we bought HubSpot and you helped me lay out the first blueprint for what it would eventually become the marketing team. So thank you.
That's funny.
But then I got a call from one of our investors. So JMI Equity led our B round. So they put in December of 2014 when we were $5 million in ARR, and they wrote it with me and the rest of the team through the exit with Primera. At the time, it was about 310. So they called and said, hey, I've got this interesting opportunity. And I had met our CEO at one point just to kind of give him some advice back in the early days. And they said, it's an awesome company with great product and a bunch of great customers. Would you be interested in helping to continue to scale it up? So it's rare that you get to join a good one that still has a bunch of legs. And it's been fun. Been here for about 15 months, redid quite a bit, and we're on the way.
It's a rare opportunity to unpack the devils in the details on this externally challenging journey of bringing enterprise products to the enterprise with absolutely no customers, no revenue, and really a barely working product that like has been tested and true. So thank you so much for walking that through and dropping knowledge on the show today.
Great to see you as always. I love the conversation. And if anybody is out there listening that wants some advice, I'm happy to give it if you want to get in touch on LinkedIn.
Thanks so much, Ed. All right, that does it for today, folks. Our episode was written and produced by my favorite producer, Matthew Brown. Editing comes from Patrick Edwards. The Science of Scaling is a proud part of HubSpot Media. And if you like what you heard today, make sure you follow or subscribe to us wherever you're a fan of the show. And if you're a founder ready to scale, check out my VC firm, Stage 2 Capital. We are backed by over 800 CROs, CMOs, CCOs from the best companies in tech, and we're ready to help with your scaling journey. Okay, see you on the next episode.